The hum of the research station was constant, almost like the pulse of an unseen heart, and it was always there. Dr. Elias Stanton knew it well, too well. He had spent years in this isolated corner of the galaxy, a quiet observer of the ever-ongoing dance between humans and the alien species they had come to call allies. The flickering lights overhead, the low chatter from distant rooms, and the endless buzz of equipment, it all blended into a backdrop that had become part of him. Yet, despite the station's ceaseless activity, the corridor outside Stanton's lab was always empty. He liked it that way. After all, how could anyone notice the man who worked in silence? A janitor with a Ph.D., a genius invisible to everyone but the machines he tended to like they were his children. Today, though, the hum seemed a little louder than usual. The usual faces, drifting soldiers, alien engineers with their vibrant skin, and fellow scientists with their ambitious projects, were absent from the halls. They had a purpose. They always did. And Stanton? He had his. With each passing hour, he hunched closer to his work, his hands gently moving across the strange alien artifact resting before him on the desk. A dark, metallic object with iridescent swirls of unknown origin. He could feel the weight of its significance, but none of the others could. At least, not yet. They weren't ready to understand, to see the things he could see. Outside the window of his lab, the stars drifted by, indifferent. The station orbiting a barren moon, a place without history or meaning, just like Stanton. No one knew what he had unlocked. Not yet. No one knew that the piece of alien technology sitting in front of him was the key to understanding the universe itself. He had cracked it. Not that anyone cared. The doors of the lab slid open with a soft whoosh, but Dr. Stanton didn't look up. He didn't need to. No one entered the space unless they had a question, and questions were something he hadn't heard in a long time. Footsteps echoed through the room, steady and deliberate. Stanton's gaze never wavered, his fingers tracing the complex lines etched into the alien artifact. A small hum vibrated from the object, reacting to his touch in a way that sent a shiver down his spine. "I hear you've been working late again." The voice was soft but commanding, like the sound of distant thunder before the storm. It was Dr. Mira Blackwood, the one person who had been paying attention to him. At least a little. She wasn't like the others. She didn't need flashy titles or accolades. Mira understood what it meant to work in the shadows. "I'm fine," Stanton muttered, his voice rough from disuse. He had been saying the same thing for years. "Fine." "You're never fine, Elias," Mira pressed. "What's so important?" "The artifact's been inactive for days. Don't tell me you're still trying to crack its secrets." Stanton's fingers stilled. The artifact responded to his touch, the lines flickering in time with his heartbeat. He could feel it now, the connection. As though the object had known he'd be the one to find it, the one to solve its riddle. "I'm not trying to crack it anymore, Mira," he said, his voice distant. "I've cracked it." Myra's gaze shifted to the artifact on the table. "Is that so?" she asked, leaning in. Her curiosity was palpable, but there was something else there, too. Something deeper. "Yes," Stanton replied softly, his eyes flicking to hers for the briefest of moments. "But what use is it? To them? To anyone?" Mira shook her head, her lips curling into a sympathetic frown. She knew the answer just as well as he did. There was no room for quiet brilliance in this place. Only the loudest voices ever made it to the top, and Dr. Elias Stanton was not one for loudness. Outside the lab, the muffled voices of the station's inhabitants drifted to the halls, unaware of the storm brewing just below their noses. They moved in waves, like a tide that paid no mind to the rocks beneath the surface. And in the far-off chamber at the heart of the station, Queen Zalira stood beside her daughter, Saran. The alien queen's sharp, calculating gaze swept across the bustling crew of her people, but her eyes kept returning to the human research station, the one they had allowed to remain on their territory. "What of him?" Queen Zalira asked, motioning toward the windows, where the silhouette of Dr. Stanton could be seen through the translucent walls of his lab. "He does not interact with us." "Why?" Saran, who had been watching the human through her own window, frowned. "I do not know, Mother. I've tried to speak to him. He avoids me. Avoids everyone." The queen's brow furrowed, her thoughts calculating. The humans are strange creatures. This one more than most. Why does he isolate himself? Saran bit her lip, a gentle curiosity rising in her. Perhaps it is his dedication. His work. Maybe it is a form of devotion. Queen Zalira's gaze hardened. No one should be so devoted to their work that they become invisible. Saran. Especially not one as important as him. Saran tilted her head, her silvery eyes narrowing. I wonder, she glanced at her mother, what if we spoke to him? Directly. The queen gave a cold smile. If he won't come to us, we will make him. I want to know why he avoids me, why he hides. This silence is troubling. The station continued its hum in the background, oblivious to the silent war between the human and alien cultures that was quietly building within its walls. Dr. Stanton looked up from his work at the quiet knocking sound. The door opened slowly, revealing the silhouette of someone he didn't expect. The tall, regal figure of Queen Zalira stood in the doorway, her presence commanding yet unspoken. Behind her, Saran watched with a mix of curiosity and something else, something Stanton couldn't place. His fingers twitched as his heart quickened. The queen spoke, but all he could hear was the rush of blood in his ears. Dr. Stanton, she began, her voice low but unwavering. I've heard much about your work, but not why you avoid us. Why do you ignore my daughter? Stanton's gaze flicked to Saran, her alien eyes soft but intense. For a moment, the world around him seemed to freeze. Then, as though on reflex, he spoke. I don't avoid her, he said, his voice almost hoarse. I avoid the noise. The words hung in the air, and for the briefest of moments, all was still. The silence in Dr. Stanton's lab had become almost a living thing. It wrapped around him, a quiet cocoon that protected him from the chaos outside. But now, with the presence of Queen Zalira and her daughter Saran standing just beyond the threshold of his workspace, that silence began to break apart. It felt like a storm was gathering, though no wind stirred. Dr. Stanton shifted his weight, still perched on the edge of his lab stool. His fingers brushed the alien artifact before him. Familiar, like an old friend that spoke to him only through the hum of its strange energy. It pulsed once, just once, in tune with his heartbeat, and for a brief moment, he wondered if the artifact understood the weight of the moment. Was this what he had been waiting for all these years? Queen Zalira's eyes narrowed, watching him as if she were calculating the best way to dismantle the quiet mystery he had become. Your work has been impressive, she said, her tone cold yet tinged with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. But this avoidance? It's not fitting for someone of your capabilities. Stanton's fingers tightened on the edge of his desk, his thoughts swirling. He had spent so long in the shadows and the quiet, unnoticed, and now he was here, caught in the direct gaze of an alien queen. He almost wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. I don't avoid, he murmured. I've just never found reason to stand out. You want a reason? That's it. I'm not here for politics or for recognition. I'm here because this, he gestured to the alien artifact with a sweep of his hand, is what matters. Saran stepped forward, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and confusion. She had been silent up to now, watching him as though trying to decipher an enigma, and now she found herself standing mere feet from him, the human who had so casually brushed off the opportunity for fame and glory. It was strange to her, and it made her feel a strange pull. I don't understand, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, as though speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile connection between them. You have done things no one else has. Yet you turn away from the very things that would recognize you. Dr. Stanton met her gaze. It was a look he had seen too many times before, compassion, curiosity, pity. But this time it felt different. She wasn't just a curious alien. She was someone who was truly trying to understand. And it was that look that cracked something inside him. I don't need their recognition, Stanton said, his voice growing stronger with each word. I need the truth in my work. That's the only acknowledgement I want. It's not about the spotlight. It never was. The words felt almost absurd, a denial of everything he had ever been told. People needed praise. People needed titles. But not Stanton. No, He needed answers. Truth. Zalira echoed, almost laughing. Her laughter was like ice scraping against the glass of the station's walls, cold and unyielding. You call it truth? You call it work. When you bury yourself in these objects, in this machine? The Queen's words cut into him, but he didn't flinch. It's more than just a machine, he said, his eyes blazing now. It's a connection, a bridge to something greater. You want to step out into the light, but I've already stepped into something much more profound. What does the light offer you if all it does is blind you to the things that matter? Saran, still unsure, stepped closer. I don't want you to step into the light. I want to understand you. I want to understand why someone like you chooses this silence. Her voice was soft, but it held something powerful. A plea, a demand, something more than just idle curiosity. For the first time, Stanton found himself at a loss for words. She wasn't asking for the usual, why do you hide from us? Question. She was asking something deeper, something that cut through the layers of his carefully built barriers. Before he could answer, the station's alert system blared, piercing the moment with shrill, ear-splitting sound that shattered the stillness of the lab. A moment ago, it had felt like a private conversation between them. Now everything had changed. Stanton's body went rigid as the alarm echoed through the station's halls. He didn't have to look at the screens to know what it was. A system failure. One of the core reactors had gone offline. The peaceful hum of the research facility had been replaced by the chaos of emergency protocols. The station's primary systems are failing. Myra's voice crackled over the intercom. We've lost control of the atmosphere systems. A shutdown is imminent. We need your expertise, Elias. Stanton's heart pounded. He could feel the pressure of the moment bearing down on him. The quiet had been shattered. He had no choice but to act. Turning quickly, he moved to a nearby control panel, his mind already calculating the steps he needed to take. He had worked on this system countless times before, though never in a situation quite like this. He knew every wire, every interface, every algorithm. The reactor, the core, the atmosphere, they all had to be brought back online. But it would take more than just his knowledge. It would take the work he had been doing in secret, his research on the alien technology that had been dismissed by the station's higher-ups. Behind him, Queen Zalira and Saran stood frozen, watching as the human scrambled to his station, his hands flying across the console. They had expected him to be a passive participant in their grand scheme, but here he was, taking control, saving them all without a second thought. I can fix this, Stanton muttered to himself. I can do this. Saran stepped closer, unable to resist the pull of his intense focus. She had seen him before, quiet, withdrawn, isolated, but now she was witnessing something different. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that transcended everything he had told her earlier. The quiet man had become a force of nature. Queen Zalira, standing just behind Saran, watched in silence. She had seen countless leaders, warriors, and scholars in her time, but she had never seen someone like this human. His quiet dedication had turned into something else, something raw, something unyielding. And it was this force, this inexplicable power, that would save them all. Stanton's fingers flew across the terminal, and within seconds, the core reactor's status light flickered from red to green. The systems began to hum back to life. He had done it. He had saved them. But the question that had been building in his chest, one he had never allowed himself to ask, echoed through his mind as the station stabilized. What happens when the quiet man is finally seen? The station's alarms faded into a distant murmur as the systems came back online. Dr. Stanton stood before the control panel, his hands trembling slightly. The red lights had turned to green, and the hum of the reactors felt like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. But that reassurance felt fleeting. He had done it. He had saved them. But now, for the first time in years, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The silence he had cultivated, the silence he had chosen, was no longer his own. Is it over? Saran's voice was tentative, almost unsure, as if the enormity of the situation was still settling on her. Stanton turned slowly to face her. His eyes, once so fixed on his work, now met hers with quiet intensity. His breath was steady, but his mind was racing. The station was safe for now, but the truth of the moment had settled heavily on his shoulders. The spotlight he had so desperately avoided was now blinding. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of everything unsaid. "It's over. For now." Saran took a step forward, her silvery eyes locked onto his. There was something in her gaze, something that had been absent before. "I saw you, in the lab, when everything was falling apart. You didn't hesitate. You acted. You didn't care about the consequences. Just the work." Her voice faltered, her words now an unspoken realization. "Why?" Stanton's throat tightened. He had spent so long hiding in plain sight, burying his worth beneath the layers of work, convincing himself that the absence of recognition was a choice, a silent rebellion. But now, with Saran standing in front of him, he couldn't escape the question that had been hovering just beyond reach. Why? The answer, though, felt like a weight too heavy to carry. "I don't need the recognition," he said, his word a reflection of what he had always believed. "I don't need their approval. I just need to do what I do, because it matters." Saran's eyes softened, but she didn't say anything at first. Instead, she stepped closer to him. This time, her presence didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like understanding. But before she could speak, the station doors slammed open with a violent hiss. The sound was jarring, like the slap of reality against a dream. In the doorway stood Queen Zalira, her posture regal, yet her eyes flickered with a mix of awe and something far less forgiving. Behind her, Dr. Blackwood and Commander Vance stood, their expressions unreadable. The moment shifted, as if the quiet intensity of the room had been shattered by something far more dangerous than silence. "You saved us," Queen Zalira said, her voice cold, yet undeniably impressed. "And yet, you've been hiding from us all this time. Why?" The question hung in the air like a blade, and Stanton felt his heart race. There it was, the truth he had been avoiding for so long. The recognition that had been thrust upon him now, in the harshest of lights. "You don't understand," Stanton replied, his voice quieter now, but the words felt like a confession. "I'm not like you. I didn't need your applause. I needed to understand, to do the work that mattered." Queen Zalira's eyes narrowed, her gaze never wavering. "Your work is important, yes, but your silence, your avoidance is a challenge. To us, to everything we stand for." Saran, standing at Stanton's side, looked at her mother, her face a mixture of conflict and understanding. "Mother," she said softly, her voice calm but firm, "maybe we misunderstood him." Zalira's gaze flicked to her daughter, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before it vanished. "What do you mean?" Saran took a deep breath, her eyes turning back to Stanton. "He's not avoiding you. He's avoiding the noise, the distractions, the politics. He's here for the work, not the fame." A strange silence filled the room. Queen Zalira, who had ruled with authority for centuries, seemed momentarily taken aback. Her sharp, calculated mind was racing, trying to reconcile what she had just heard. "You're saying he does not want to be part of this?" she asked, her voice softer now, though the edge of command still lingered. "I never wanted to be part of it," Stanton replied, his voice steady, but his heart beating in his chest like a drum. "I just wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered. But the recognition, it's a complication." Zalira's expression hardened once again. "Then you've misunderstood what it means to be part of something larger than yourself." Stanton stared at her, his emotions conflicted. He had spent so much of his life hiding in plain sight, avoiding the very thing that could have elevated him beyond his own narrow view of the world. But now, in the face of the Queen's icy gaze and Saran's understanding, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to see before. It wasn't about avoiding recognition. It was about fearing it. Commander Vance, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his voice breaking the tension. "We can't ignore this anymore, Stanton. You've saved us. You've proven what you're capable of. And now we need you. All of you, not just the quiet, the work, but you." Stanton turned to Vance, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Vance's eyes locked onto his with a rare intensity. You've been hiding in the shadows long enough. It's time to step into the light. To show everyone what you can truly do. The station, no, the galaxy needs your brilliance. Not in the quiet, but in the open. For a moment, Stanton didn't respond. The thought of stepping out of his carefully constructed shell filled him with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. Could he do it? Could he face the light he had so long avoided? Then, without thinking, he spoke. I didn't do this for the recognition, but maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe it's time to show them why the quiet man matters. Saran smiled a slow, knowing smile. The quiet man doesn't need to be quiet anymore. The station hummed quietly now, the aftershocks of crisis still reverberating through its halls. Dr. Stanton stood in the heart of the research bay, surrounded by the hum of machinery that had once felt like a barrier between him and the world. Now it felt like a bridge, connecting him to everything he had been avoiding. He could feel it, that strange pulse of energy that surged through his veins, just as it had with the alien artifact. The work was no longer just his. It was theirs. It was theirs. The door of the bay slid open, and Commander Vance stepped in, his uniform immaculate, but his expression unreadable. Behind him stood Saran, her eyes still wide with that unspoken understanding. Queen Zalira followed, her regal presence filling the room like a wave of tension. Stanton could feel it before they even spoke. They were here, really here, ready to confront the reality that they couldn't ignore anymore. "I've been thinking," Vance said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of what had happened. "This station, this entire mission, relies on collaboration, but it also relies on individuals who are willing to break the mold. You've been hiding in the shadows. Elias. And I get it, but we can't move forward without you." Stanton met his gaze, then turned to Saran, who stood quietly beside him. Her eyes were softer now, understanding etched across her face. "Why?" Stanton asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why now?" Saran stepped forward, her presence magnetic. "Because you've already changed everything without even trying to." She paused. "The quiet man has a voice, and that voice, it's the key." Zalira finally spoke, her voice low and commanding, though it held a thread of something unexpected, something close to respect. "We cannot afford to ignore what you've done, Elias. You've saved us, but you also saved the potential for something greater, something I didn't see until now. I didn't understand the power of your silence." Stanton blinked, his mind racing to process the words. He had spent years hiding, pretending that the quiet was a choice, that his contributions didn't need recognition. And now, standing in front of him, were the people who had seen through that mask. They saw the truth. "You speak of potential," Stanton said, his voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and emotion. "But all I wanted was to understand, to connect with the work itself. Not the accolades, not the recognition, just the answers." Queen Zalira stepped forward, her alien eyes narrowing with intensity that spoke volumes. "But you did not see what that could mean for all of us, Elias. For the galaxy. There is more to this than the answers. There's a need for unity, real unity." Stanton's breath hitched. He knew what they were saying. He understood. The truth wasn't just in the answers. It was in the connections they had yet to make, the walls they had yet to break down. "It's not just about the technology," Zalira continued. "It's about trust. You've shown us that, and you've proven that in ways none of us expected." Stanton's mind reeled. The thought of stepping out into the light, of embracing the recognition he had so long rejected, felt almost absurd. He had built his entire existence on being invisible, on being the quiet architect behind the scenes. Could he really become something else? Could he allow his name to be known, to stand beside them and be seen? "I've always believed that the work would speak for itself," he murmured. "But you're right. I've been afraid of what that might mean. I've been afraid of being someone else. Someone who stands out." Saran reached out then, her hand brushing his arm gently. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding," she said, her voice a whisper against the cacophony of emotions swirling inside him. "Maybe it's time for you to show us everything you've been holding back." A silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. The work that had once been his secret, his burden, was now theirs, shared and acknowledged. And yet, in the absence of that secrecy, Stan could feel something else growing inside him, something he had never allowed himself to feel before: the weight of the truth, the need for connection, and the terrifying beauty of recognition. "Do you want to know what I truly see?" Stanton asked, his voice steady now, no longer shaking with uncertainty. "I see a world, no, a galaxy, that has been built on the quiet work of individuals who never asked for recognition. And I see myself in that. I see the quiet men and women who have always been overlooked, always been ignored, but who have always made the world turn." Vance, Saran, and even Zalira listened in silence, their eyes focused on him as if seeing him for the first time. "I see a future where we stop waiting for the spotlight," Stanton continued, "where we embrace the quiet, not as something to hide behind, but as something to stand in, because in the quiet, there is power, there is strength." Zalira stepped closer, her expression softer now. "I never thought I'd hear these words from you," she said. "But I understand now. You were never avoiding us. You were teaching us all along." Saran smiled, her eyes shining with something akin to hope. "And now we're ready to listen." Stanton took a deep breath, his chest swelling with something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't just relief. It wasn't just acknowledgement. It was something deeper, a connection, a realization. The quiet wasn't something to be afraid of. It was a space where everything began, the space where everything could change. "Then let's change it," Stanton said, his voice now filled with conviction. Together, the room seemed to breathe with him, the walls vibrating with the power of what had just transpired. The future lay ahead, uncertain, but bright with the possibility of new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, Dr. Elias Stanton felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of belonging.